It is estimated that Indian smart grid products and solutions market is expected to grow 3 times from $6.5 billion in 2019 to $18.5 billion by 2030. This will help reduce India's staggering 18.5% approximately transmission and distribution loss rate in financial year 2019 to 15% in the next 2 years, according to the Central Electricity Authority of India. In the upcoming panel discussion on India's grid infrastructure, we are joined by industry experts to discuss this topic in detail. I would like to welcome Vikas Gaba, partner and lead Power and Utilities KPMG, to moderate this panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Gaba.
A very good afternoon to all. I am Vikas Gaba, partner with KPMG, and I lead the power practice at KPMG. I welcome you all to this panel on India's grid infrastructure, part of ET's Energy Leadership Summit. Let me also welcome our distinguished panelists. First, we have on the panel Mr. KVS Baba, Chairman and Managing Director of POSOCO. I've known him for many years, and he's responsible for integrated system operation for the entire country. And Mr. Baba brings about 33 years of experience across system planning, power system analysis, and market operation. On the panel, we also have Mr. Arun Kumar Mishra, Director, NPMU National Smart Grid Mission. We have been working very closely together in recent times on smart metering. He has spent long years in power system and ICT solutions for better grid management. He is also the Vice Chair of the International Smart Grid Action Network. Let me now welcome Mr. Manish Agarwal, President and CEO, Infrastructure and Business Solutions, Sterlite Power. He leads the power transmission infrastructure business at Sterlite and has also been associated with the telecom business of Sterlite earlier, and very passionate about new technologies and power transmission business. We will also be shortly joined by Mr. B.B. Mehta, who's the Director of Odisha Power Transmission Corporation Limited. He also brings a lot of experience in power system operation, covering two states, Odisha as well as Gujarat. So in short, a very eminent set of panelists with deep experience across the panel themes. And let me again extend a very warm welcome to all. And before we begin into the specific questions to the panelists, let me make a few introductory points. The key things that I believe that relevant to the topic are very important when we look at India's grid infrastructure. First, I think we live in a world where the realm of T&D infrastructure is very large today. Besides the traditional definition of infrastructure like lines, poles, substations, transformers, modern infrastructure encompasses a whole lot of IT, OT technologies, communication, control equipment, digital equipment, and platforms. As a country, there is infrastructure deficit. We all know we need massive upgrades, but we must look at this lens as well to extend the definition of T&D infrastructure. And this additional infrastructure also has all dimensions. They require capex. There is a job creation into newer areas that is linked to this infrastructure. There is higher efficiency, productivity, and so on and so forth. Second point is decarbonization is at the core of massive infra buildup that we are seeing today. Renewables has assumed a central place in the power system and is influencing the infrastructure decisions today. Transmission upgrades, green corridors, control centers like REMCs, the newly mooted DSOs that have been mooted in the policy are all aligned to this reality of making a clean and green system that is efficient and customer-centric. Third, and I'm sure all panelists would agree, that bar of efficiency and reliable service is going up and up. Higher voltage levels, higher efficiency, valid for all the segments, including system operation. Fourth, digital is a norm, no longer a choice, needs to be and must be offered as part of all infrastructure upgrades. And the last 2 points that I want to actually, 2 factors that I want to bring in this, which I don't think as of now are adequately focused across segments, but one is resiliency. We are prone to many threats today, whether it is disaster, cyber events, pandemic, etc. And this has implications on how we define infrastructure, how we set our goals, how we order the specifications of equipments and systems we are installing, our procurement philosophy, and much more. So how this can be embedded into our architecture of all of our infra upgrades. And second is leveraging data, the data architecture and applied intelligence that data can offer for business insights. This is where the true value is. I'm sure my panelists will touch on these points. And with this, let me open it for discussion. And let me begin with Mr. Baba. And Mr. Baba, you come from POSOCO and you are working very closely. POSOCO, NLDCs, RLDCs come under that structure. To me, these institutions are linchpins of power sector operation. They keep the entire power sector together, and their core role in maintaining secure, economical, and sustainable grid service. So a range of new initiatives are happening across the power market and system operation domain. Ancillary markets have been launched. MBED's concept paper has been floated. We are seeing initiatives on AGC, SCED, National Open Access Registry. So to me, when we talk about infrastructure and system operation has become a kind of magnet of innovations and creating modern infrastructure. What is your view on this? Let me invite you, Mr. Baba.
Thanks to Mr. Sudhir Pal Singh and the team who have persuaded me to be part of today's panel. And good afternoon, Vikas. You have rightly pointed out that today we are in the helm of affairs and the center of, and I happily agree with you that system operation is the center stage, no doubt. And load dispatchers have been vested with many responsibilities by the government and the regulatory commissions. And Faculty of System Operators is grateful for the enabling provisions by government and the commissions to both. And definitely load dispatch centers are, not only in the center of power system operation, but as part of reforms also. We have been supporting every aspect, this thing. And so we are definitely enjoying our contribution in the sector and the reforms. So you have taken many, first and foremost, we have to say that we have moved from the era of maximization to optimization now. Making available at what earlier we used to say, make it available at any cost. But now we are moving to making reliable power economically. So the domain has changed. So there are many challenges. As you mentioned, that renewables, decarbonization, all these are part of it. So, we are also geared. In 2015 itself, we have partnered with the government, Ministry of Power, and prepared a document how to integrate renewables. So 5 years before, we have 6 years in rather. So we have prepared what are the 15 action points, what are required for integration. So there are a lot of generation mix is coming. And so what is going to be in the market side? So accordingly, we have geared up in the RLDCs and NLDC. So a lot of in-house capability has been built up. You all know that we have developed the software for SCED and the optimization. Then we have in-house prepared the RTM, real-time market that you are aware. And we have introduced the RRAS, regulation ancillary services, and like that. So we are moving now once the renewables are there. So a lot of most important point is now is the reserves. So the importance of reserves and how it has to be primary and secondary frequency controls that are essential. So that we are working on it, and we are sure that AGC already commission has given an order, and we have already almost connected 35 gigawatts of almost thermal plants for our newly commissioned NLDC system. So it is just going to, if COVID was not there, we would have rolled out all this by March itself or April. So this, because many plants are now working with the skeleton staff, so we are slightly waiting for a confirmation from the plants. So we are going to roll out the AGC in a large scale. And you know, ancillary services have, I mean, the new regulation has come, draft has come, that you are all knowing. So that we are trying to prepare ourselves. So, you know, SCED is already in operation for last 2 years. So now the new discussion paper, MBED also, we are preparing ourselves how to do it. But the important point is here is there are few prerequisites in successful implementation of any reform, is that first of all, strengthening the intrastate systems. We require adequate capacity building, and the tools, the necessary tools at the state level also are equally important, because everything from top down is not right. It has to be bottom up also. So the things have to be there. There will be a good synchronism should be there, and echoing should be there. So similarly, the regulatory commissions, the central regulatory commission or the state regulatory commissions also have to be in sync. And so we have to be, I mean, this is now the one of the most important aspect, if I say that. And for implementing all these things, for the MBED especially, the demand forecasting from the state is most important point. First initial step, I would say, as of course, Mr. Vikas has mentioned that NOIR is coming. Yes, we are, I mean, we are also eager to complete, and commission it. And a lot of activity is going on in it. And I'm not much saying about REMCs, Ms. Vikas has already covered, but there is a lot of things which we have to learn. The forecasting, then we have to sharpen our skills of forecasting. Last year, the standards have come on the technical connectivity. So one important aspect which we have learned in this renewables is that dynamic state measurements and dynamic modeling and their simulation, testing of and validation of models. This is a real challenge that all system operators are now getting geared. We have really taken a lot of interest on this modeling part, and we have clearly brought out what are all the requirements, how to connect it. And so then the grid code also is giving all its support, and suitable provisions are made. Like this, we are, and one more last point I would like to say, for effective implementation of so many things is the institutional capacity building is the most important point. One important aspect which, like we have a CEA, CTU at the center, so the overall planning. After the unbundling, this is missing in the states. So we need to have certain institution building at the state level. SCRCs are there, and power procurement cells are there, SLDC is there, but overall planning body is required. So a similar setup is required for long-term vision, adequacy, autonomy, and one more important, these SLDCs are commissions who need to have adequate autonomy, and a lot of manpower is required. So a lot of capacity building is required at the state level. So, important point which Mr. Vikas has brought out is that resilience. Yes, most important point. We are working towards this resilience, and in SIGRA level also there are many working groups which India is. I'm very happy that our team is part of that working group, and we are working a lot on resilience. And you can see this during the COVID. We have done so much of how to operate the grid even remotely, or with if suppose something happens, how to make a backup control systems like that. So many things we are working on. of course, anyhow, all this is happening because there is a large grid. India is connected. So, I mean, all the diversity factors and all diversity in the country can be, efficiently gained because of this grid. So the ultimate, our job is to manage this grid with more economically optimal utilization of the resources.
No, I think very useful points and some very interesting thoughts. We'll come on to this for follow-up questions. Let me now go to Mr. Agarwal. Now, Mr. Agarwal, you have seen the telecom business, you have seen the transmission business, and you've seen various technologies evolving on the transmission side, be it EHV network, fiberization, underground substation, GIS substations, and so on. I certainly believe that transmission is far, far ahead vis-a-vis distribution in terms of technology adoption. So as a country, where do you see, having looked at the global picture also on the transmission side, where are we vis-a-vis the global developments in India on transmission? Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you for inviting me for this panel discussion on ET Energy Leadership Summit. Pleasure to be here on this panel. So let me try to answer the question, Vikas. So if you see, we fundamentally believe that access to electricity is a significant driver for prosperity and human development. And as a country, we have taken massive strides from energy poverty to 100% household electrification. And there is no easy feat for a country with 1.3 billion population that we have. And we have further committed ourselves to two ambitious targets. One is on the generation side, which is 450 gigawatt of RE capacities by 2030. And second, which Mr. Baba also pointed out, 24/7 quality and affordable power for all on the demand side. So the transmission sector plays a critical role in ensuring both. In this space, you will see that technology today is solving some of the toughest challenges of energy delivery. Some of the very important ones that come to my mind are, first is, I would say, the uprate and upgrade of existing infrastructure, where right-of-way is severely constrained, which has become essential, doing these uprate and upgrades on similar corridors and increasing the capacity by as good as 20-30x. And today we see that as many 20 state utilities along with Power Grid in the country have adopted this philosophy. Another one would be around substation. So to resolve the land acquisition challenge, India's first vertical GIS substation was built in Gurgaon about 2 years back. A conventional GIS substation of similar capacity generally requires 12 acres of land, but this innovative solution was built only on 3.8 acres, resulting in 75% reduction in land size. There's one more around live line with zero shutdown reconductoring of transmission line. This will gain a lot of momentum and traction, especially around the metros and urban areas. And we have seen such project being implemented by Karnataka utility in Bangalore. Power flow controllers, which are planned for alleviating congestion and enhancing grid flexibility, especially in RE-rich estates. Then pilots and demonstration projects have been undertaken for technologies such as dynamic line rating in Kerala and Maharashtra. I believe such technologies exploit latent capacities in the network. Many developments have been taken around aviation. So today we see aerial technologies, including heli crane based tower erection, helicopters being used to, do the loading of material and helping the tower erection faster, and drone stringing. These are being deployed to deliver projects under compressed time schedule. Satellite imagery is another one, and machine learning driven software. These are being used to optimize the routes of transmission lines. Robotic technologies are emerging for high risk operations, ensuring safety and also speed. And one such example you will see that in the country we have is Today, live line replacement of earth wire is happening with OPGW, which is optical ground wire, in a massive way across the country for all 132 kV and above on existing transmission lines. And the country has around the same country has witnessed, you will see massive deployment of fiber-based communication networks at 132 kV and above for a resilient grid. You touch base on the global community. So during my interaction at international forums like SIGRE and IEEE, I have seen global community acknowledging the massive strides taken by the Indian transmission sector in terms of new technology adoption. And I firmly believe India will lead the world in great scale energy storage solutions also. Thanks, Vikas.
I think very interesting. Again, I think the repainting the range of technologies, I'm not sure we can say with this confidence on the distribution side, but also I think you brought out a lot of things like line replacement, robotics, all of that are also amenable to distribution. So are very useful in those respects as well. Let me come to Mr. Mishra now. Somewhat similar question. You are vice chair of the International Smart Grid Action Network. You've seen interacting with many developing countries as well. So you are exposed to these developments. Again, vis-a-vis the global technology landscape on distribution side, how do you see India and what is required to be done there? Mr. Mishra.
Yeah, Mr. Vikas. Thank you for inviting me here. And the technology is interesting, and for engineers like me, it has been the lifeline in the sense. But my exposure through International Smart Grid Action Network, that has given me a new perspective. And of course, recently I have upgraded some of my skills. So technology is, there are two things which I would like to highlight from the beginning. One, when we talk about technology, it's not only the artifact. So car is a technology, but car in itself is not going to be successful unless there are roads and there are drivers and their drive to visit places. So that's the kind of things you have to have technology. You have to have those skilled people who are using that technology to their goals, and their ability to set those goals and actually continue to exploit them and harness their skills is to a large extent has a learning curve based on the enabling environment of the regulations of the requirement. So what I've seen around the world is the technology in distribution sector, there are multiple. There are nations which are going to third wave of smart metering. There are nations who are contemplating the first smart meter installation as well. There are nations which are going for technology dependent solutions for grids. Then there are nations who continue to be dependent on their consumers to actually serve them, not necessarily deploying technology and other things for the edge devices. So having captured that, my experience has been the technology has actually matured to a large extent, whether you would like to automate something or you would like to have a resilience to 99.99%, or you would like to eliminate the human interventions right from metering, billing up to the consumption end. So technology landscape is changing, it is maturing, and solutions are available. It's a challenge to actually evolve a methodology of transforming the existing goals structure, existing regulatory environment, and fit in the new solutions and new things. So that's where I see there is a healthy need and opportunity, and that opportunity actually gets exploited through people and processes. So technology is fine, we can build and we can deploy, but is where I'm finding the biggest challenge in terms of bringing their goals congruent to the new technology and removing that fear, uncertainty, and doubt of if they depend on this technology, will it not make them, for some it is a challenge, will it make them irrelevant? For others, it is a fear that we will be dependent on this technology and technology providers will start demanding their pound of share, and we are running in already on such a thin margin, so we may or may not be able to sustain. So all those fears are not only specific to our geography. These fears, these uncertainties, and these decision-making challenges are seen all around the globe. So there are adoption, and then there are these, hesitations. But yes, solutions exist on all segments.
Thank you. I think very interesting point that options are many. It is choices in our context and purpose that we need to make, and how usefulness we derive and how they influence. Welcome, Mr. Mehta. I'll come on to you. Let me go to Mr. Baba, and then I'll come to you since you've just joined. So, Mr. Baba, coming back to you now. Again, while we are talking about distribution, one of the aspect where we say a phenomena that has dominantly been successfully done in transmission being extended down, because we are seeing a lot of embedded generation now at the distribution level, is distribution system operator that has now been mooted in the policy. Of course, as you have always maintained that we are late and we had to do this much earlier. So what are your views on that? What kind of architecture will work? How this should be evolved at the state level? To me, it is very critical. Mr. Baba.
Yeah, thank you. Before we come to the architecture part, first we should understand what is the role or pivotal role that the distribution system operator going to play, first of all. Okay, so is he only a technology data integrator, or is he going to be rested with the responsibility of other than the technical? So that we should first of all understand. So there are state-led dispatch centers are already there who is managing, but now this distribution system operator, is he going to be a super aggregator type? So I am trying to give a different, he is going to be the bridge between the transmission operator and the state-led dispatch center. Definitely, they are a system operator, I should say. And the like a large group, like once this, why the DSO is required is the introduction of so much of renewables coming in. So all the consumers are becoming prosumers, and lot of at the rooftop, and so many interventions are coming. The state system operator, it will be difficult, especially on the behind the meter energy resources that you appreciate. So the point here is that we have to see that there are many new challenges. So this is an opportunity. So for this distribution system operator is going to, look after the demand response also. So how, and ultimately he is going to look after the satisfaction of the consumer also. So he is going to play a lot of bridging role, in my view. So first of all, this concept should be first of all clear. It is not that it is only he is trying to aggregate the data and try to give some information exchange. So all these role of a DSO, we need to crystallize. Of course, even in, this is that. So he has to play a lot of optimization also. He has to see how to integrate all these various resources. Then, of course, without doubt, frequency control, how he can contribute towards the frequency control through demand response, or congestion management, or voltage control, these things. So he is going to be a big player in future. So and lot of synergy is required. And see what is happening now is the most important point which I have not covered is the flexibility that is to be embedded in the system with the advent of renewables. The most important factor that a system operator is going to face is the requirement of the flexibility. It is not only resiliency, but it is the flexibility too. So the procurement side on the distribution, they need to have three types of resource adequacy. One is the base, another is the flexible, like ramping up services and the peak services. So this is what that is very essential. So the DSO is going to play a major role in facilitating that, and he is going to do the synergic planning along with the main system operator of the state. So that is why the role of DSO, first we need to, and no doubt he needs to have a lot of ICT and digital communication and whatever that you are envisaging at the state system, but the level of requirement of the communication and all has to be almost equal to that of a main state system operator, a central, regional or state system operator. So, I mean, this is a very important aspect. I would like to say, and you know, our Mehta Sahab is the expert on the communication side and the dispatch, I mean, the hardware part of it. He would add more color to this I hope. But in my view, I would like to say that what is required is the, first of all, the role clarity of the DSO and what is the, I mean, how the ISO DSO is going to interact. So these are to be first, I mean, very clearly outlined. And one more important point is that we need to have very clear, there's a, I mean, settlement system, financial metering and the settlement system, we call it in Samast, that should be implemented before this DSO. Before we roll out DSO, the Samast should be there. And of course, I've been always telling that capacity building of the dispatcher has to be there, and we have FOR report is there, Kabil, that has already outlined the importance of DSO, and it has given a lot of aspects of it. So in my view, it is one of the major challenge or major, I mean, interesting topic for any system operator is the DSO.
Again, very interesting point. As much as it is a challenge, I think it brings opportunity. And what I heard is that we need a consistent definition so that ad hocism doesn't come in when these systems are evolved and they are as it is evolved in the country. Now, let me come to Mr. Mehta, and welcome to the panel, Mr. Mehta. I think just extending this forward, how do you see this concept further evolving, the DSO concept? And why I want to ask is that you have been in two states, one today in Odisha and earlier in Gujarat. So how do you see the challenges respective and the lessons you have learned in two states? And this becomes very important because many states are different when we start implementing and looking at infra upgrades. What are lessons you would want to share in states that are different from each other? Mr. Mehta.
Thank you so much. I'm extremely sorry I could not join in time. Let us just see the diversity between the West and East. It is as usual, what is diversity in the other segment like economics, finance and technology. So same diversity takes place over here. But power sector has a lot of other things to take away also. There we were purchasing the power, here we are selling the power. There it was about how to meet the demand, here how to take away the liability of the fixed cost of the tied up power plant, and how to minimize my commitment towards the fixed charges and reduce my end cost to the consumer, power to the consumer. So a lot of things are there. And apart from that, specifically with respect to Odisha, linking with respect to environment, with respect to cyclone or the coastal area. So it is a prone to this any natural calamities frequently. So it leads to a lot of disruption in the system operation. And it is easy to operate a large grid. Baba Sahib is there, or this very senior person. But it is really difficult to operate a 2000 megawatt grid where is having a large number of large size machine, and one machine trips, it leads to a lot of diversity and imbalance in the grid. So the lesson learned first between the two states is whatever way we are, whatever we plan, but we have to see that what is my grid stabilization, what is my grid situational awareness tool indicates me how to operate the grid in a real time. And that will be supported by very good planners in our SLDC who will permit for the planning of the transmission of the generator element outage. Another key role the real-time operators to play about very vigilant eye, very sharp things on the what is happening in the transmission network. Because in a season which we are passing through, there is a very significant changeover in the network element frequently due to various climatic conditions. Under that situation, it is really difficult to manage the grid, and at that time we should be very vigilant. So I am of the opinion, though we have a SCADA, but we have not gone for any advanced analytical tools. We are not using the PMU data to the extent we need to have it. So better visualization, better optimization solution at the disposal of the grid operator is a need of time. I'm not commenting much in detail, but there was enough time to avoid the Mumbai occurrence during the October 2020, sir. Almost 2.5 hours start from the first occurrence, and it leads to the collapse of the Mumbai grid. So any situational awareness software and tool would have advising the grid operator in that screen. I think some action would have been taken and we might have survived. It's not a guaranteed one. But today we are going based on the wisdom of the person who is driving the show. And that wisdom drastically varies from season, person, mood, and other parameter also. And many times I have seen, specifically in Eastern region, the availability of data is quite less as compared to the Western region. So a lot things has to be done up to the right from the grassroots level, sir, to provide the real-time data to the grid operator for all various parameters, bus status, transformer tape positions. So many things are not done over here. So that is being done now. Now, with respect to, sir, your important question, which was under discussion about the distribution system operator. So now a lot of things is behind the meter. Till the date, we were monitoring just outside the meter, what is power being consumed. We had a AMR which monitors the quantum of power in different time slots. And we had a distribution transformer monitoring system in a RAP-DRP stream. Then we had a feeder management in RT-DAS stream. Then a lot of things has taken. But now the day has come because now the consumer is also a prosumer. He is also facilitating, Baba Sahab has rightly pointed, he is supporting any demand side management. He is supporting any demand decimation. He would like to avail the fruits of time of the day tariff also. It is not today, but tomorrow it is going to come. So at that time, I, as a distributed system operator, need to keep an eye out because ultimately, sir, SLDC will have to manage the power as per the demand requirement. Now, if the demand requirement is not properly estimated, the SLDC will estimate the demand of the state or a DISCOM, but something which is already been produced by the DISCOM itself or the consumer of the DISCOM itself, that has to be subtracted. And the net demand to be met from the resource which is being dumped, which is put in a schedule, only has to be accounted for. So it is a high time that we think about the distribution system operator. We clearly define role and responsibility for the DSO. No doubt, it may differ little bit vary, depends upon the state or its terrain, its geographical or the power system setup over there. Say in Odisha, we have a very limited number of rooftop solar, but in Gujarat, we have close to 600 megawatt rooftop solar. So the role of DSO varies from state to state also. So we have to take that thing also in equal, but we can very well define the primary role of DSO. Then Baba Sahab rightly pointed out, how does it transfer the information to the system operator, main system operator or SLDC? Because unless another, if he keeps the information with himself, it is not going to serve the purpose. So it has to be percolated, real-time transfer of data, every now and then, time and again, and then we'll have a correct information to run the show very meticulously. It has to do in two ways. One is a plan mode things. Say based on the season, based on the tariff, based on the time of the day data, it will advise the SLDC about tomorrow's requirement of power in his terrain, his distribution company, overall that what shall be the input available power in his distribution company, because microgrid concept is also coming now frequently nearby. So that is going to add all this look, and then we'll able to do the system operation more meaningfully and optimally, sir.
Sure. Thank you. I think very interesting again points, and key point that struck me is that look at the physical infrastructure of the state and their context, and then start with what we need to do. Coming to Mr. Agarwal again back, that in disaster-prone states, the disasters can be many. There is cyclone, there are natural disasters, but also cyber, equipment failures, etc. Now, what kind of resilience measures Sterlite has been taking, and what we can do more to build better resilience in the system?
Great question, Vikas. Thank you. Some of the things already touched by Mr. Mehta. Good afternoon, Mr. Mehta.
Good afternoon.
So, to answer this question, so if you see, strengthening of transmission infrastructure is very important, that we all have been talking over the last many minutes. And I believe states and center both have to invest in also brownfield investment into transmission to complement the greenfield projects, which will fasten the operates and upgrades to bridge the capacity gaps that we are seeing without taking up any additional ROW. So that's one. Investment in grid automation, which will enable collection of key information on online real-time basis on status of power flows and developments on grid from all national SLDC centers. This on a strong communication backbone can help generate automated what if analysis, which is critical to provide operators, I believe, relevant and timely information for swift decision making. Again, Mr. Baba and Mr. Mehta pointed these out. To prevent disruptions to the grid from accelerated climate change related events, towers, I believe that they need to withstand higher wind speeds and brave the impacts of rain, floods, change the changing courses of rivers. And these all should be factored into the new tower designs, while existing towers which are there must be strengthened to take care of any such environmental changes and keep our grid resilient and transmission network going. Cybersecurity is an omnipresent threat to power systems. This also secured on high priority by all involved in grid operations and power delivery. You talked about Sterlite Power, what we are doing. So some of the initiatives, which we have been driving is, one is that we have a very strong power system capability department, and where we do all kinds of studies on transmission, sub-transmission networks at the center state, and many times, we go to the decision makers and give our own views. So that's one. We also offer solutions like power flow controllers that help maximize use of existing grid capacities considering operational margins. And all our installations and transmission lines and substations go through rigorous type and routine testing before being used at site. And this is done to ensure nothing but high degree of reliability and availability. Thanks, Vikas.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. I think there is a method. What I learned from this is there is a method to it. There are technologies and options available. We must use it. How we want to use it is our choice and bring better resilience. Let me come to Mr. Mishra. I think one of the observations when I was looking at the draft National Electricity Policy is that the agenda of smart grid has possibly reduced only to smart metering. While there are many things around and developments around IT and OT aspects, which you very well know, and we have been involved in quite a few discussions, can be done. So what is your view on this? How this can open up? Are we looking at base foundation infra first and then opening up? What is the thinking behind this?
Yeah, Mr. Vikas, you are right that currently you will see only the all the information coming in that as if we are only doing smart metering. But let me reassure you that there is a reason behind it, and there are three things to it. One, when we have seen the experience of worldwide smart grid, what technology is coming at the top? So the smart grid is fine. You make a smart grid for resilience. You make it for getting consumers on board. You make it for options to the consumer, or you make it for renewable integration, or you simply make it for optimization of your overall supply chain. So the top technology, and it has been consistently the case, be it in 2014, be it in 2020, ISGAN has done a survey, and the top technology which emerges is smart metering. And that's an area where the footprint in India is, we have started up in 2012. Current footprint is not adequate in terms of percentage of the edge nodes which have been covered, though it is quite an impressive number in absolute terms, because number-wise we are quite ahead. So having seen that, it is important that we have learned from international experience, and then we have chosen a smart metering, and our agenda is not limited to a smart metering as such. The smart grid is where we will be looking at edge, and what we'll be looking at edge is resilience, diversity, what we can accommodate, or for that matter, democratization of participation. And all these things can only be done if we do not have any doubt about what is at the edge, and a smart meter makes the biggest difference, transparently making it available to all stakeholders that what is the edge and how it is performing, and how you evolve it from where you are. So where we are is we are hopefully inadequate in knowing our edge in consumer. There are all sort of historical baggage we are carrying in terms of this is how our consumer is, or this is what consumer needs. But whenever we go and intervene through technology, we find that consumer needs much more. We are close to rather more than 25 million consumers, and we can't have one size fit it all. Our experience in urban setting of high, of quite a homogeneous setting in a small part of a subdivision, what we have seen is there are 10 different set of consumers, which those set covers only 80% of the consumers. Balance 20%, they end up having their own requirements, they end up having their own patterns. So all that is going to be opened up by smart metering, but then it's only a technology. It will only give you an insight. What you make out of it, that depends on other stakeholders. So those stakeholders need to start experimenting, and our smart grid is going ahead with pilot projects in those areas. What all can be experimented, be it time of day use, be it on demand response, be it utilizing consumers' flexibility in shifting your upgrade. Maybe you do not need a transformer upgrade for 10 hours a day peak load breach. Maybe you can bring on board consumers so you can live with the transformers for 2-3 more years. Maybe you can influence the consumers to put a rooftop under the transformer, and you can extend the usability of that infrastructure for another 3 years. So sky is the limit, provided there is an experiment, provided there is liveliness on the part of all stakeholders, be it regulator, be it users, be it the utility, and that happens when there is a trust, and trust is unlocked if there is a transparency, and again you have meter data sitting there. Periodic meter data made available consistently, it unlocks so much transparency and builds the trust. So yes, that's the case. We are big on smart meter, but then we are also aware of the fact that other technology of ADM and OT, at least it's 7 years, 10 years that utilities are experimenting and not this one. And this what makes the biggest difference. That has been the worldwide experience, and that we would like to unlock that potential here as well.
Sure, thank you. I think this is a very important space that world is looking up to, and not only in terms of what happens, but also the vendor base that the opportunity space it is creating for global vendors. Now we are towards the latter part of, we have few minutes left. Quick 2-minute intervention from all the panel members. First, Mr. Baba, I think I have heard a lot personally about the capacity building and skilling agenda that POSOCO has delivered very successfully in terms of the certification and so on. Do you want to speak about it, how you have been able to do it successfully?
Right from beginning, we always say that unless systems are echoing, overall improvement cannot take place. So it is, again, I always say that it is a bottom-up approach we should follow. Top-down approach we have been doing so many years. So the first is the capacity building of the states are very essential. We always believed in, and we have to say thanks to regulatory commissions, they have appreciated our idea, and the certification process was introduced, and we have successfully coordinated in such a way that there is a certification process is there, and there is recently we have introduced even the incentive scheme. It will roll out shortly from the regulators, this thing. So this will enable us, our enthusiastic people can take interest in this, and not only that, externally, in POSOCO, we have created our normal training programs, or HRD. We have requested states to come voluntarily without any additional this thing. So for every course, I have told that 5 people from the states are free. So they make it. So I just make it so that people see. Ultimately, the knowledge is to be disseminated, and their improvement will be the country's improvement. That is, we always believe in it. So I practiced it. So that is the point. So
right, I think
whatever we can do at our level is not sufficient. It has to come. Everyone should feel the necessity of that. And so this is how I started this.
I think very inspiring, and the more inclusive we can make it and bring the larger ambit of utilities, operators, all of them, I think it will become more and more powerful for the sector as a whole. Mr. Agarwal, question to you again, short 2-minute intervention. What is the market outlook on power infrastructure as a whole, transmission? What is your view on that and the opportunity space that is coming up?
So because given India's energy transition, I think significant investments are needed in the transmission sector for a robust grid, which we have been talking. Today, around 70 to 80% of interstate projects are being awarded through TBCB route, which is tariff-based competitive bidding, whereas in intrastate, you will see only it is happening around 10 to 15%, but I do firmly believe that it is going to drastically increase in the next 2 to 3 years, since people are seeing the benefits around cost and time. And despite the pandemic, projects worth about 28-30,000 crores, primarily associated with the GEC, green energy corridors, power evacuation, were awarded in the last 2 years, which is a big number. And we also expect a very large market release in interstate, especially pertaining to, again, GEC and green energy corridors in the next 6 to 12 months. Investors, if you see, they have the investor interest has shown substantially in transmission in the last 3 to 4 years, primarily due to predictable cash flows, lower operational risk, and robust payment security mechanism, along with billing and collections, which is managed by CTU for all the interstate projects. There is a lot I feel that can be done, and some of the things which comes to my mind for this panel, which can help revitalize the sector, would be First one would be long-term perspective planning for transmission. Second one would be revision and early commissioning incentive of Ministry of Power RE transmission projects are now getting done in 18 to 24 months. There is a need of SSA, state support agreements for on-time commissioning of transmission evacuation infrastructure. Then there is SBD, which is a standard bidding document. This has been pending for many, many years. I think government is requested to take this on highest priority and see that the upcoming bids are also issued under these new SBDs, and that will provide necessary impetus to the private sector. Transmission lines, corridors, when you're building, the biggest bottlenecks are around clearances, which is forest, wildlife, state, local body permits. I think a lot more to be done in terms of facilitating the transmission people to make the lines in a timely manner. So a lot has been done, but I feel there's a lot that can be done to improvise that. Concession or TBCB projects, I think we have been doing for overhead projects, but I firmly believe that this should be thought for underground EHV transmission networks. And I thought, I think Mr. Mehta or someone said that, in Orissa, it is prone to cyclone. So these networks around those areas and in the metros, in the urban areas, and also where we have recently we heard about Supreme Court ordering around Great Indian Bustard, that lines should go underground, while everything cannot go because of the cost. But this is one area where government should think about TBCB projects. And finally, last one I would say is freedom of design in making transmission lines. This is very similar to mature TBCB concession transmission market like Brazil. And this will, believe me, this will lead to a lot of innovation in the industry if we are able to do so. So that's all from my side.
Very useful points. Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Mehta quickly again, just quickly 1 minute. Again, skill development, everyone has said that it needs to percolate at the state level. What are the gaps you see? Why it doesn't happen? What can we do to...
Sir, the role of system operator is much critical or equally critical like ATS, air traffic controller. A single mistake not allowed. Here, so we can't afford to a single mistake, because say single mistake has a chain reaction. It will lead to the zero power in the area, island, domain, or terrain. So now to do that, today the scenario is that he need not be only the electrical engineer. He should know the reliability. He should know the regulation. He should know the power system flows. He should know how to carry out the online system study. So capacity building is a need of time. It is very well gone by the POSOCO. POSOCO itself has a lot of training program other than the certified program for us. So that way we need to do it, and it is an ongoing process. Even the PMI, NTPC has come with a 2-year power management. We are bringing some senior people for that course also. So capacity building is need of time, and it is going to remain, and that will only bridge the gap between the raw engineer and the expert or a seasoned batsman in the field.
Thank you. And last question, Mr. Mishra, coming to you. What I have often seen is when we are able to derive meaningful insights, it also gives meaning and push to better infrastructure, because that is put to use and that is used for business insight. So how can role of data, what is the role of data you see in modern and responsive grids?
Modern responsive grid has two very critical changes happening. One, everyone is now looking at power at least cost. Not only in India, let us be very, very frank about it. Everyone is looking at least cost. And second thing is, everyone is looking at grids to be the harbinger of their guilt. Harbinger of solutions for their guilt on the environment. And both these are going to, destabilize grid like anything. All existing practices, choices, as well as the learning, they are under massive attack. There will have to be a relearning, and everyone will be learning simultaneously. We cannot learn from someone else. And that's a situation of a massive co-creation of knowledge. And that can only happen when we collaborate, when we have the right data, which gives us trust that what we are looking at is the truth, and that is the truth, and we should collaborate to create our goals and reach our requirement of, be it the decarbonization, be it the least cost, while such a big disturbance is there. So without data, this transformation is not likely to be successful. It will happen not in time. It will happen not at the cost. It will happen not without disruption. If there is a data and there is a method to, in the sense that the raw data is useless, you will have to process it, create your own views, right views, where it goes to build the trust right from regulation to the consumption end. So as long as we are going to do that, it's the data and only data which is going to make us enable for in time, least cost, and transformation for decarbonization of the grid. Data is critical. Data is the key.
Mr. Vikas, I would like to say one point
Sure, please.
on this. Sorry, see that it is not only data. I would like to clear. A point is, I would like to supplement is that we need to have adequate capacity within the organization to analyze the data. See, the point is that if you have data and give it to some consultant, he will give some report and implement is not the things. So the intrinsic strengths of the organization have to be human capital. We have to respect and we have to harness that. So we need to, that is the most important point, is that we should not, everything should not be outsourced. At least the intelligence has to be harnessed. Data, we need to provide the data, and we need to have various alternatives. We have to, do a lot of synthesis we have to do, a lot of analysis we have to do. And for this, only capacity building of the organization. Please let us not depend on somebody's report and start implementing. I would like to request that I always say my state operators and myself, and I believe in it, is that we please have your own analysis. Everything you need to have. Let's not depend on somebody else's data processing and you implement it. You please analyze. So we need to see the pattern analysis. We need to, everything has to be done. Once you do this, then optimization, everything will come. So you first respect the data, clean the data, prepare the data, do the analysis yourself. And that is what more important. That is why I said in my opening, demand estimation at the grassroots level is the first thing to start with for any optimization for anything. I grabbed the mic.
No,
Thank you, Baba sir, for wonderfully elaborating what needs to change for that co-creation of knowledge from data.
No, very rightly said and very profound. I think we have had a very interesting set of discussion around diverse topic. Infrastructure is a diverse thing. Some points, I think, important one, move from era of what you said, Mr. Baba, maximization to optimization. Huge leap of capability exists on system operation, but again, states need to come up to the speed, both in terms of people, skills, systems. Strong institutions derive strong reforms, so we need stronger institutions at the state level. There are technology options for many things, and Mr. Agarwal alluded to many options of that, but again, they need to be used. The choice is ours. They need to be used in our own context and purpose, and the pilots, test cases need to be created for that. In context of DSO, I think the role definition becomes very clear. It will be a massive scale reform at the state level, so we need to build, we need to prioritize what states need, and accordingly a blueprint needs to be evolved. Again, resilience is important. There is to be a method to it. Their tools, options, everything is available, and test cases are also there. Smart metering has been pushed as a foundation infrastructure. Our ambition has been set. Implementation base is very large, 250 million meters, and we are not dealing with purely homogeneous set of customers. There is some heterogeneity that needs customization, but willingness of utilities is also equally important in this context. Capacity building needs both top-down and bottom-up to come together to create that motivation for employees, whether it is certification, whether it is incentivization, all of that is very, very important. What we also heard is, at least on the transmission part, we heard everyone is bullish in terms of the investment requirement that is coming, the investor interest, the risk perception, and of course the transparent frame of bidding that has been launched. Of course, there are improvements that Mr. Agarwal pointed out at 5-6 points, including the wider adoption of newer SBDs that you mentioned. And the last, more softer aspect of data and skill development go hand in hand. We need to nurture both of them. Data is critical. Without that, we can't do. It will not provide us insights. It needs collaboration to create wider data regime. But again, it is equally important to interpret, derive insights, and implement. And that requires people capacity. So with this, let me end this panel discussion. Thank you to all the panelists and EP Energy for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for giving detailed inputs. Stay tuned for the next session.